The purpose of a paragraph is to articulate the points relevant to your essay. Each paragraph should only focus on one point at a time because anything else will cause confusion. Now, the hard part of a paragraph is knowing what to include and how to include it. So today, I want to show you 1 out of 4 paragraph structures that I'm going to be demonstrating over the next few videos. Today's paragraph structure is called compare and contrast. And just as the name implies, we're going to compare and contrast 2 separate variables. And so here's the essay we've been working on. We're going to write the paragraph under this first section here of nonverbal communication. Now, to fully complete this structure, we're going to include these 4 elements: a topic sentence, our compare and contrast, a supporting example, and then a concluding sentence. Let's go ahead and start with our topic sentence. For a topic sentence, you need to introduce the point of the paragraph. And this doesn't have to be extravagant. A good strategy is to simply write a general statement about the point you're going to make. And so for ours, I might write, the first major consequence of excessive social media use in interpersonal relationships is how different it is compared to in-person communication, with the former often leading to misunderstandings. Great. A couple things I'd like to point out. As you can see, we've introduced our 2 variables and we've indicated how we're going to be discussing them. Not only that, but a good topic sentence should always consider the material that came before it. In this case, it was our introduction. And so factoring that into our topic sentence, we include what we introduced in our introduction here at the beginning of the sentence. And then finally, note the phrase, the first major consequence. This acts as a cue to the reader, letting them know that there will be multiple consequences discussed throughout our essay. This is also known as a transition. For the second element, we're going to follow through with what we said we're going to do and include our compare and contrast. I'm going to start this by discussing in-person communication first. In-person communication is heavily reliant on nonverbal cues that provide clarity, essential context for interpreting emotions and intent. Examples of these nonverbal cues include facial expressions, body language, and vocal tone. So as you can see, I've explained what it is, why it's important, and I've provided a few examples. To balance this, I'm now going to do the same thing for digital communication. In contrast, nonverbal elements are not present in digital communication, particularly through text-based messages. This often leads to frequent misunderstandings, which can create a variety of issues, some of which include creating unnecessary emotional tension, dependence on regular and frequent messaging, or even getting the time or place of a meetup incorrect. Note the phrase in contrast. This is another one of those transitions. In this case, it's acting as a cue to the reader that we're transitioning from one variable to the next. But with that, our comparison is complete. Now would be the perfect time to provide an example that's going to validate what we just said. And so I might write, a study by Kruger et al. Supports this by stating that people frequently misinterpret the tone of digital messages, often assuming emotions that were never intended. Great, that's our citable example, but to fully complete the example element, you always want to include some form of an analysis or interpretation. So furthermore, unlike in-person conversations where misunderstandings can be quickly resolved through verbal and nonverbal feedback, digital interactions tend to fester, leaving room for ambiguity, which in turn weakens interpersonal connections. Just like the other sections, you want to include some cues that let the reader know that this is the example section. So for example, we say a study by Kruger et al. That lets the reader know that this is our citable information. We found this during the researching process. Also, the phrase supports this, that cues to the reader that this is what we're using as evidence to back up the point we're making in this paragraph. The last thing we need to do to complete this paragraph is to tie everything together into one clear, solidified sentence. A good strategy for this is to simply summarize what was in the paragraph. You never want to introduce new information or open-ended material. So ours might read, while digital communication offers convenience, its lack of emotional context can lead to confusion, unintended conflict, and strained relationships. Great. Now we're ready to move on to the next paragraph, which I'm going to do in this next video. I'm also going to give you another strategy you can use for structuring your paragraphs. I'll see you over there.